Hey, my name is Alec Wenzel, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what things we should look for when we're going to purchase a new guitar. Now, this should be coming out right after the holiday, and maybe somebody got you a guitar that you're not as excited about, and you're going to take back for some store credit to look at some things that you might be more excited about. Or maybe somebody gave you some holiday cash to help put towards a new guitar purchase, and you're going to go in and start checking out some new gear and see what's out there for you. So these are just some general tips and things to watch out for and things to consider when you're buying a new instrument. I'm going to be using this G&L ASAT Classic as kind of my example guitar today. I just did a video on it that's sort of a review of all the tones that it's capable of, and there's a lot of playing in that video, but there won't be any playing in this video. So if you're interested in hearing what this sounds like and what I was sort of reviewing and looking at, I'm going to link that video on screen for a second here and then again down in the description. But let's get into it. Let's start talking about things that we should look for when we are about to purchase a new guitar. So what are some things that I'm looking at when I'm evaluating a new guitar and whether or not it would be a good instrument to have around and add to my collection and take out and gig with? Well, I'm going to break this up into a list of 3 different categories so you have some easy points of comparison. And those 3 categories will be playability, how does it sound when it's plugged in, and finally aesthetics. And then at the very end, we'll go over some places where you can compromise, because maybe you're really lucky and you walk in and the first guitar that you pick up and play has everything that you want in those 3 categories, but more than likely you'll be comparing a couple of different guitars together, and this list will sort of help you evaluate which one is going to be the best for you. So with that, let's jump into that first category of playability. All right, so let's get into that first category of playability. Now, what do I mean when I say this? Well, to me, playability is anything that has to do with the physical act of playing the instrument, right? So it doesn't have anything to do with how the guitar's electronics sound or how the guitar sounds when it's plugged in, and it has everything to do with how it feels to physically maneuver around on the instrument. Now, the most important part of this playability category is how does the neck feel, right? The neck is the most important part of any guitar to me because it's going to determine how easy it is for you to articulate the things that you're used to playing. Now, the 2 things that we want to look at with any guitar neck are how thick does it feel and what is the string spacing like. Now, guitar necks that are too thick can make you feel clumsy and like you're reaching too much or you're stretching in a way that's uncomfortable. And a neck that's too thin can make you feel like you're overshooting where your hand usually would be, or like it's uncomfortable to place your fingers down because it doesn't follow like the sort of natural curve of your grip, right? So how do we evaluate this? Well, it's important to note that guitar neck depth is measured at the 1st fret and the 12th fret, and most guitar necks taper. Now what this means is that the thinnest point of your neck is at the low end and the thickest point of your neck is higher up at the higher frets, right? Now this is important because sometimes we can trick ourselves into thinking a neck is comfortable for us because we're comfortable in one area of the guitar. If you have a neck that's too thick and it feels good playing your chords and licks down here, but it feels like you're stretching as the neck gets further up, higher on the fretboard, then that doesn't mean it's a good guitar for you, right? Just because you're able to play comfortably in one position. We want it to be comfortable in all positions. Alternatively, if you have a neck that's too thin and it feels like you're overshooting on the low end, but it's pretty comfortable up here when you're playing your licks, then that means the neck is a little too thin, right? And we want to shoot for somewhere in the middle. This is really kind of a Goldilocks game, right? We're trying to get something that's just right, something that might feel a little stretched down here, but ultimately feels comfortable overall is going to be something that's better than something that feels completely uncomfortable in one spot and completely comfortable in another, right? Now, the other thing that I brought up there was string spacing, right? If you have strings that feel a little bit too close together, then it's going to feel hard for you to articulate your licks because you'll always be hitting the string that's right next door, right? So we want to make sure that we can sort of comfortably pick in between our strings and not have strings that feel too close together or too far apart. Now you can kind of evaluate this by looking at our nut width, right? And this is how wide the nut is all the way up here at the low end of the guitar. Now, they make nut widths of many different sizes, so I would recommend asking for some different categories of that to move around in, right? And that'll help give you an idea of what it is that you like. Now, another aspect of playability that we want to get into is how does it feel to hold the guitar, right? Does the body feel comfortable, or does it feel like it's digging into us? Because it doesn't matter how comfortable a neck feels if you come away from it and you feel like you're getting stabbed all the time. It's going to make you not want to play that instrument. So something that's important is to check out whether or not your guitar has body contours, right? If that's something that you absolutely need. This one has some really nice curvature right here, so my arm rests comfortably on it. And it also has sort of a belly contour, so my gut is not getting stabbed. Now, that may not be important to some people. I think that some people are totally comfortable on a just slab of wood, and I like plenty of guitars just like that. But if you really need something that feels comfortable, then try to figure out whether or not a body contour is something that you absolutely need in your instrument. And finally, the third thing is the weight of the guitar, right? We always joke about how heavy Gibson Les Pauls are, sort of on the internet. We all know that they're just, like hanging a 10-pound weight off your neck. But that's something that can really wear on you, right? I have a 13-pound guitar back there, and it's impossible to play live for any sort of length of time because it's just digging into my shoulder the whole time. And I still love playing it. I play it sitting down at home. But if you intend to take this guitar out gigging and it's something that you're concerned about, you really want to be aware of how heavy a guitar is before you purchase it. So, just to sort of cover that again, in our category of playability, we want to be evaluating first and foremost our neck. Does it feel comfortable in our hands? Is it too thick or too thin? If it is too thick, can we go down a size without sacrificing articulation in a different part of the neck? And same thing with if it's too thin. If it's too thin, does it feel good to play up here but bad to play down here? Then we probably need to go up a size and get somewhere in the middle, somewhere that feels nice and right, like a Goldilocks effect, like I said earlier. And then also we want to evaluate body shape and weight. Is it too heavy to play comfortably for a long period of time? Because if it is, you're not going to like it long term, and it'll always just sit at your house and you won't enjoy taking it out. And same thing if you need a body contour or not, because if it's stabbing you, same issue. You're not going to want to play it. You're going to leave it sitting on a stand and you're going to wonder why you picked it up. All right, with that, let's move on to our next category of how does it sound? All right, so let's get into the second category of how does the guitar sound when it's plugged in? Now, this is going to be something that's kind of different for everybody, right? If you're someone who's playing heavy metal, you might be looking at like a super high output humbucker or maybe like an EMG style pickup. And if you're somebody who plays like more vintage styles of music and that's the sound you're going for, then you might be looking at like a more vintage sounding Les Paul or maybe like a vintage sounding Tele or Strat. So it's up to you to sort of make that decision and decide what it is that you need. But my big piece of advice here is don't buy something similar to something that you already have, right? We have three main styles of pickups that come to my mind when I'm thinking about guitars. And those are single coil pickups, humbuckers, and P90s, right? So if you've already got a Les Paul with humbuckers in it that you really like, maybe don't go get a Telecaster that has two humbuckers in it, because what ends up happening is one of those guitars just sounds better as your humbucker option, and you end up, not playing the other one as much, right? You might go out and get that Telecaster with two humbuckers and still feel like you love your Les Paul, and that's just what you'll play a lot more. So when you're looking at your collection, try to pick something that you don't have and pursue that, right? If you have that Les Paul I was talking about earlier, maybe your next purchase should be like a vintage style Telecaster or like a vintage style Stratocaster. So then you're kind of covering that humbucker and single coil situation. If you've got, say, like an Epiphone Casino with some P90s in it, well, P90s are, while they're not a single coil, they're closer to a single coil guitar. Then maybe you look at a Super Strat, right? Where you have like an HSH setup and you get those humbucker sounds on like a Strat body. And this will sort of let you branch out more and feel like you've got more options of guitars to play. So now that we've chosen a guitar to shop for that is unique to our collection in terms of sound and style, maybe goes in a different direction in terms of pickup selection, how do we evaluate those pickups when we're shopping for that new guitar? Well, this is again something that's totally unique to you, right? You're the only one who knows what kind of sound you're going for, and you're the only one who knows what kind of responsiveness you like out of a pickup. But the one thing that I would caution against is picking a guitar that sounds too warm. If you have a guitar that has like too many lows in sort of the pickup, it's going to sound kind of dull and lifeless, right? Now this might sound really great when you're playing alone by yourself, but as soon as you get into a band setting or you're jamming with buddies, it's going to be really hard to stick out in a mix and you're going to feel like you're getting buried, right? It is always easier to take highs out of a signal than it is to add them back in. This is due to our tone knob, right? The way most tone knobs work is they pull high frequencies out of the signal. So if you start with your tone knob on 10 and the guitar is really warm and dark, you're not really going to be able to make it brighter. However, if you start with the tone knob on 10 and it sounds really bright, you can always darken it up by lowering that tone knob down and getting a much warmer, fuller sound. And I guarantee you're not going to be missing anything. You're going to love it, right? Also, guitars that, are a little too dark can end up sounding flat and lifeless, right? So how do we evaluate this? Well, we want to plug into the front of an amplifier. We don't want a pedal board in between, right? Pedals can contribute to tone suck, or if you start turning pedals on, they might be adding or removing frequencies as you're playing, and you might love the sound of the guitar in that situation, but you're not going to love it as much when you get home and maybe put it on your own pedal board, or you might feel like you're missing something. So when you plug into the front of that amplifier, make sure your guitar sounds nice and bright in all settings with the tone knob turned all the way up, and then warm it up and see if it can feel nice and warm that way too by turning the tone knob down. And that way you're going to have a nice full range of sound to work with. And that's kind of how you want to be evaluating your pickups, if you feel like you can get a full range of sounds out of the guitar. All right, so now let's move on to that last section of aesthetics. All right, and so finally, let's get into that third category of aesthetics. Now, as much as I'd love to believe that we would all be biasless when we went to shop for an instrument and really just made our decisions based on exclusively the playability and the tones that a guitar is capable of, we're not like that, right? We want a guitar to look inspiring to us. We want it to look and feel like something our heroes would have played. We want it to look like something that was on a record that we loved, right? So it's hard not to be considering the way a guitar looks when you go shopping for one. So the thing that I would say about this is try to keep a little bit of an open mind, right? And if you're into, say, classic colors, be comfortable with looking at a range of classic colors as you try out the guitars for their playability and like what their pickups sound like, right? So maybe you're comfortable with like a black Clapton Strat or a Fiesta Red Strat or a Sunburst Strat, and those are all okay by you. Maybe you're comfortable with like a burst colored Les Paul or like a solid black Les Paul, Try to keep a little bit of an open mind so there's a range of options that you can look at and not limit yourself. So yeah, with aesthetics, let's just, try to keep an open mind and be careful about it because it is important. We do want it to look like inspiring to us, but, also make sure it's going to be something that feels cool. Don't compromise so much that you're going to hate it and just leave it at home all the time, right? And so that's really kind of all I have to say about the aesthetic value of guitars. I mean, it's important. We all want to look and feel cool, but we also want to sound good too. So let's try to stick with that. Like open mind, but still feeling pretty cool. So now let's talk about where you can kind of compromise on some of this stuff. So now that we've talked about the three categories of things that we should consider when purchasing a new guitar, let's talk about where we might be able to compromise in some of those categories. Now, this is going to be like any kind of pros and cons list where we're going to want to have more pros than we have cons. But luckily, since we've only got 3 things to consider, the list should be pretty easy for us to come up with, right? If we want to consider buying the guitar, we're going to need 2 out of the 3 things that we talked about in this video for us to have it on a possible buy list, right? But the kicker is that one of those things always has to be playability. So it's always got to be playability and you love the aesthetic, or playability and you love the way it sounds and are comfortable changing some of the things about the aesthetic. This is because playability is the most difficult thing to change about a guitar, right? If you love the way a guitar looks and you love the way the pickups sound, but you feel like the neck is a little too beefy, well, then to shave it down would require a professional to invest a ton of time in shaping that neck for you, and would likely require an additional investment of hundreds of dollars. Same thing if the body is too heavy or too uncomfortable. To reshape the guitar body would be a lot of effort, right? To try to shave off material and contour it would take a professional and hundreds of dollars of investment, right? Let's say it's too heavy, you just can't make the wood less dense, right? You could try to chamber it, but again, that might change the way the guitar plays and feels, and then you've changed the whole instrument anyway, and maybe you should have just bought something that was more playable at the get-go, right? So now that we've talked about why playability is so important, let's talk about where we can compromise on our aesthetic, right? And this is one of those things that's a little bit closer to playability, right? You can't buy a Telecaster that you love when you were expecting to get a Stratocaster and turn it into a Stratocaster. Some things that you can change about it are like these sort of minor details that might make something more personal to you. I have a friend that hates gold hardware, right? But if he loves the way a guitar plays and it has gold hardware, he'll just buy the guitar and change the hardware to nickel. That's a pretty easy change to make, right? If you don't like, you know, certain styles of knobs, you can put new knobs on. If you don't like the way a pickguard looks, right? Let's say it came with a black pickguard and you really wanted a white or a parchment guard, you can order one and put that on, and it's not generally going to be a big deal. Changing things like color, however, that would mean, you know, stripping all the paint off the guitar and sanding it down and repainting it, and that's a massive undertaking. So I wouldn't recommend going, man, I hate this pink guitar, but I love the way it plays. Let's just see if I can buy it and strip the body. That's not necessarily a reasonable choice. You know, if you're looking for a project guitar, that's up to you and that's something that you want to pursue, then great. But, you know, for the most part, we want to like the color, be comfortable making minor changes to aesthetic details like hardware and knobs and pickup covers. And yeah, you know, we can change some things. We can't turn a guitar into something else, but we can make it more personal for us. So that's where I would say you could kind of compromise on the aesthetic, right? If you love the way a guitar plays and you love the way it sounds and you sort of like the way it looks, but you just want to change some small things, like that's very reasonable. But like I said, you know, if you're compromising on aesthetic, you can't change a guitar into something else. You have to like it a little bit and make small changes to it. And then finally, if you love the way a guitar plays and you love the way it looks, but the pickups have that lifeless quality that I was kind of describing earlier, that's the easiest to fix of all of the categories. We can put new electronics in guitars very easily, and there's dozens of companies who are making different types of pickups and different wiring setups for your instruments. So that's the easiest one to fix, right? So hopefully if you're picking a guitar out, you should love the way it plays and love the way it looks, and then be comfortable changing things about the electronics and the pickups, since that's the, you know, easiest thing to approach. And that's sort of how I would treat compromises when I'm, you know, shopping for a guitar. Maybe not every guitar I pick up is this wonderful thing that I want, but I can see possibilities for it. And so if I love the way it plays and I love the way it looks, I'm super happy to swap out pickups. If I love the way it plays and I love the way it sounds, but there's some aesthetics I could change to make it a little bit more me, then I'm cool with that too. But in general, we want to pick something that lets us just avoid major changes to the instrument. We want to love it at least a little bit. All right, and that was all the things that you should consider when purchasing a new guitar. And finally, where you can kind of compromise on those different categories. Those categories, again, are playability. Do we like the way that it sounds when it's plugged in? And then aesthetic value. And finally, where we can kind of compromise is on the aesthetic value, only if it's minor changes to certain cosmetics. And then we can compromise really hard on the way it sounds, because we can always put new pickups and new wiring into a guitar. But the one thing that we can never compromise on is the playability. If it doesn't play well, you're not going to like it, you're not going to take it out, and it's going to sit at home and you'll wonder why you bought that guitar and you'll end up selling it. Well, thank you so much for listening to me. My name is Alec Wenzel. I'm really trying to grow the channel, so if you could give this video a quick like, and if you could hit the subscribe button, that would mean a lot to me. And please feel free to leave a comment. I love talking to you guys, and it's always great to hear other people's opinions or what they liked or didn't like about the video. Again, my name was Alec Wenzel. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you're having a great post-holiday season. All right, I'll be back for more videos later. Thanks so much, and bye.